Eclipse has declared war on TKR and the rest of their sphere, and it's made quite a splash. I don't think anyone really expected it, including myself. I've been able to predict a lot of global wars, but this one just came out of nowhere. I don't know why. I didn't know why Eclipse did it. I didn't know what had led up to it, and yeah, so it caught me by surprise. I've done a bit more research now, and I've read their declarations of war, so I have a bit of an understanding, and hopefully I can convey this to the masses that also have no idea what's going on. So, a few months ago, after my last set of videos, there was another global war called Dodge This, in which Odo, which is the Knight's Radiance block, hit Rose. In my last video, they were allies. They were fighting Eclipse together, but after the war, then TKR turned on Rose and rolled them. And I think part of the explanation for this was that a few of Rose's allies merged together to form Singularity, which is now like the third largest or fifth largest alliance in the game. They're a very large and very powerful alliance, but they're also quite new. And in my opinion, new alliances are rather unstable, so losing wars has a very punishing effect. They can lose a lot of members and a lot of money. And I think TKR sought to do that. It didn't work, but they still won their war. In the immediate aftermath, then the treaty web was divided, right? So you have TKR and its little block. You have Midgard and its block. TS and Aurora, Eclipse and TFP, Rose by itself, and then a few alliances hanging around in between. Midgard had stayed out of a few globals since like 5 months ago, so they were a target for the next one. That's pretty normal. Eclipse hadn't fought since these videos either, so they were also a target. Rose, Singularity, TKR, TS, they're all sort of out of the picture for a few months because of, I believe there was a non-aggression pact. Let's check. Do they not post peace threads anymore? What's going on here? Whatever. There should be a peace thread. And even if there's not a non-aggression pact, there's usually like a convention where you don't attack each other for a few months, so that way they can get a return on investment on their infrastructure and they can build some cities. Actually, I'm just going to check Dodge This. It was in the 25th of July. When did these videos come out? Because as I'm measuring the game like this. April 29th. April, May, June, July. Okay, 3 months, yeah. So that makes sense. So Dodge This wasn't really hitting during a rebuild. But this current war is. So Eclipse, I think anticipating that it was next on the chopping block, has preemptively attacked the Knight's Radiant. And this makes sense for a couple of reasons. Number one is that Grumpy, which is in their sphere, is basically the only alliance that can take on Eclipse. The game's high tier is divided into Eclipse, Grumpy, and then every other alliance to a much lesser degree, right? I think Grumpy has like 30 or 40 nations, nearing City 50. Eclipse has roughly the same, and everyone else has like 5 or 10 of them. Or like 1 or 2 if they're below the top 50. So, yeah, Grumpy's basically their only real threat, and they're preemptively taking them out. And this should prevent any other coalition from realistically forming to take them down, if Eclipse can get a non-aggression pact out of Grumpy for like 3 or 4 months. So it's very smart, very proactive from Eclipse. It makes a lot of sense. I didn't see it coming because I thought Eclipse would just like ride out 3-4 months and then get rolled. I thought that would actually net them more money in the long term. And I don't know, I guess I didn't expect them to hit TKR during a rebuild. It's usually bad optics. It's easy to rally a coalition against such people. I think the Eclipse did the same thing last year. Did they? I think they did, yeah. I'm gonna pull it up. I'm gonna double check. It was around the same time last year. Is it this one? No. It's probably the next one. Oh no, Fallen No Stars is wrong. Darkest Hour? No. Damn it, Eclipse, where is this? Alan's Last One. Who names these wars? Homicide for the Holidays. No, micro conflicts. It's not Bifrost Blitz, I know that. It's not. We did Rose hit Cataclysm? What's going on here? Steamed Hogs, I think this is it. Yeah, okay, so Eclipse did the same strategy back in January of this year, whereas they take out Grumpy and then no one can challenge them for a few months. And when did they actually pay the price for that? I think it was 24. No, it's not. It's the one after that. It's Huh? What are these wars? Oh, I'm in 2023. Why am I in 2023? God damn it. Darkest Hour. Here it is. Okay. So. They rolled Grumpy in January. And it took until April for the rest of the game combined, excluding Grumpy, because they couldn't get Grumpy on board, to fight and take them down. So this is the same situation here, basically, where they take out Grumpy, and this time they also take out TKR, and then it takes a few months for people to rally and then take them down. At least that's my interpretation of it. I could be completely wrong. The declarations of war are really interesting. Particularly Schwinn's and where's the other one? Eclipse. Eclipse is actually quite funny. So Gato, an ally of their sphere, of TKR sphere, recently got rolled by the media, and because they were losing that war, their income tanked. They're already small nations, so it completely devastated the color trade block, the brown color trade block, which they share with Eclipse, and it cost them a lot of money, which is probably like 30-40 million a day. It's so very sad. They used that as an excuse to hit, or a justification, but they didn't actually hit Gato, so it's just a meme. Apparently they tried to get Gato off the color trade block in previous peace terms, but weren't able to do it. And this is fun. So they actually don't use one CB, they use a bunch. So they're destroying TKR's ROI. It's just a joke, but it is something they're doing, and it's something that is not looked on favorably, probably, in the future. Birthday Bash, they're rolling Grumpy because I think they have a 5th year anniversary or something. We can pull it up and check. Actually, it might be longer than that. They were formed in 2016. So this was their 7-year anniversary. Was the other one. They're rolling Gato for color trade block reasons, or whatever, but I don't think they actually hit Gato. Yeah, they're not actually declaring war on Gate or Bourbon Street. Contest honorability and rolling mayhem. I think that could equally apply to TKR, the self-proclaimed most honorable alliance. Reclaiming stolen deposits, rolling PK. That's a really interesting one that I'll get into in a bit. Ask Alexios is the reason for rolling Bourbon Street, and that's a callback to like 2018 when Bourbon Street, under a different name, got rolled, and the people rolling them only replied, when asked why they did it, just ask Alexio, who's the chief diplomat. Alexio isn't even in Bourbon Street anymore. So, yeah, that's a blast from the past. And then they listed which alliances that are not calling to help them in the war, and which ones they are including in their enemy list. They're hitting the Forgotten Realms. That is quite interesting, because TFR, I believe, is a protectorate. Unless that changed. Are they not even top 50? That's so mean. Oh, they have an MDP now. Yeah, that's how it goes. Should have kept the protectorate. Actually, I'm skipping ahead there. Where am I going? Okay, yes. So that's Eclipse's declaration of war, or the meme part of it. They put a more serious part in. Although more serious as in it's a bunch of like southern roleplay, but it does contain real information. They basically said that Grumpy was trying to organize a coalition to roll Eclipse, and they didn't think they could do it by themselves. And that while they were doing this, they were cozying up to Eclipse and saying that we're all going to be friends now, and we're going to reset relations, and we're going to be nice and everything. And perhaps work together against whatever other threats Eclipse faces. So, to me, that reads as there are basically two options here. Option one is that Eclipse has some spy in Grumpy and they gained this information, and then they've just preempted. Option two is that Grumpy reached out to Rose or Syndicate or Midgard or Singularity. Oh, actually, no, they wouldn't reach out there because there's an ODP and an intelligence clause, but they would have reached out to one of these three other blocks, and they've defected and told Eclipse that they were asked to help roll them. If that is from Aurora and TS, that is one hell of a betrayal, because they're recently allied. If it's from the others, that makes total sense, and that seems like a very foolish move for Grumpy to make. So they're paying for their foolishness. Yeah, I think it's actually very valid. I don't think there's much to argue about it. It's kind of surprising no one's asked for the logs. Usually when something's disputed or people like think they can twist words or something, then they will call for the logs. But in this case, they're not even trying, which means that Odo, TKR, etc., they know they've lost. They know they got nailed to the wall on this one. There's no counter argument, and they're going to get rolled for it. However, I will give them a little bit of leeway because they have not posted their recognition of hostilities yet, and it hasn't been that long since they've declared war. So it might be they're going to post a massive counter argument or an equally long meme thread to refute their arguments. TFP's post is a bit different because they use completely different justifications from Eclipse. And they're much more like personal or specific to TFP. In short, during last war, which I have an excellent video on, then actually I'm going to pull that up because I actually need the map here to illustrate my point. Okay, so TFP in the orange. they attacked Midgard, or not the orange, the pink. TFP in the pink there attacked Midgard in the yellow to protect their ally Carthago. Actually, that's a terrible way to explain that. I have to run down that whole war again. No. Okay. Midgard imploded, and Aurora split from Midgard and then attacked them. TFP's ally, Carthago, joined with Aurora in rolling Midgard. A bunch of TFP's other allies then rolled Aurora for the betrayal and for other stupidity. This left Carthago fighting all of Midgard. TFP recognized this. They didn't want their ally Carthago to lose their war, and they joined the war against Midgard as well. This pissed off most of their other allies, including Mayhem. And Mayhem basically wanted them to let Carthago get rolled, and Mayhem wanted to side with Midgard in that war against both Aurora, Carthago, and potentially TFP. That is the claim, that they were plotting against TFP as well. But while they were plotting against TFP and saying they might join against them, they were also trying to dictate TFP's policies and actions during the war. They wanted to limit TFP's entrance against Midgard. They wanted to limit the number of alliances they were going to fight. They wanted to limit the targets within those alliances so that they didn't attack targets that were also fighting Aurora. And they wanted to set the peace terms. So when TFP, Carthago, and Aurora eventually defeated Midgard, then maybe they wouldn't get a surrender. Maybe they'd get nothing at all. Or they'd get something that Mayhem wanted. This is a really interesting conflict because I don't know why Mayhem did it. Even now, because the politics hasn't changed that much since then. Mayhem is an ally of TKR, and they have been since that war. TKR has no special love or familiarity with Midgard. In fact, I go as far as to say they probably don't like Midgard. Midgard is probably one of their adversaries. The only exception to which is the Immortals, which has in the past been allied to TKR. But the Immortals has also fought against them. And there's also a lot of rhetoric from the Immortals that TKR abandoned them last year. So I don't understand why Mayhem was going out on a limb here. And it wasn't like TKR was supporting them. They seemed to be apathetic. It's possible that they were privately supported and that they were basically a representative of the bloc who was trying to hide its participation. But that doesn't make a ton of sense. There may be better candidates for doing that. Mayhem's quite a new alliance, all things considered. Though they have also been scapegoated in the past. There's a few of them actually that have been scapegoats, so we'll see how that goes. This is quite an interesting post. Even just the way it's formulated. It's very partisan-esque in how they've tackled it, being very specific to themselves, adding in graphs, and basically their goal in this wasn't to explain their actions. It was to provide or to create an unassailable narrative for why their war is justified. A true justification for war. And you can argue with specific elements of this, but overall, even if you were to take apart most of it, it would still be reasonable for TFP to act on this with the information that they had and with the beliefs that they had. and the depth and detail is quite something. And that they called out hypocrisy, which their rivals, their enemies, they're very often guilty of. Which wouldn't really be necessary. Like, they wouldn't need to call that out if they were just explaining their actions. It is, very much a justification. Partisan used to do these more in, like, separate threads, though. I don't think he did it in DOWs all that often. He'd keep DOWs for, like, memes and stuff. The few times you have seen these, like, longer posts in war threads are actually, like, how Stark did it recently when they hit CTO. And there have been a few other smaller conflicts that have done it as well. But still, like, involving more important players. I do quite like these. I think they add a lot of depth to the game. They explain the conflicts more, so you don't have to make 40-minute videos trying to piece together why something happened. Yeah, it's good. Aside from that, then WAP, the Weaponized Assault Penguins, joined the war as well. I'm going to try and find their post. Oh, here it is. Newt. This, I think, is mostly roleplay nonsense. But the Black Knights, a member of Tiki-Austria, they had a civil war earlier in the year. And that civil war resulted in most of their active members and fighters leaving to form Weaponized Assault Penguins. I think the split was actually very good for them, for both sides, because it forced BK to change and I think the whole government lineup changed. And they're, like, improving and they're resetting relations with a lot of alliances. It's done them a lot of good. And I think it will change their culture over time as well, which is in need of change. They were riding off the coattails of old BK and, like, the memes and stuff from that era. And it really wasn't working. It wasn't gelling with the newer player base. Because they were recruiting a lot. And, like, you're getting people from a different generation. The 90s kids and the 2000s kids are a different sort. But yeah. BK's, I think, improved a lot from it. WAP has also improved a lot. Those active members are some of the best fighters and some of the best strategists in the games. And some of WAP's members are some of the best fighters and the best Milcom people in the game. There are also a lot of less than politically correct people in there, unfortunately. But that's not too uncommon across the game. And this is a weird war, because when WAP left BK, then they they did it kind of secretly. They didn't tell BK that they were forming. They hid the number of people they'd recruited within BK, and they were trying to withdraw lots of their money from BK's bank before leaving, and that money did belong to them. But altogether, this action would cripple BK, and it did cripple them. I think it cut them in half. So BK, I believe, didn't return some of the deposits, or it argued about it and perhaps reduced the amount that was able to be withdrawn. And that's not totally unreasonable. That's pretty normal for alliances in those sorts of situations. However much it's decried by the wider community, it is sort of necessary to limit a crisis and then, over time, handle things. WAP, though, is punishing them either for that action or because they want to reclaim deposits which were not fully returned or that weren't returned at all. It's entirely possible that this was an issue that happened in their last global war. I believe it's this one, Darkest Hour. Or, it'd be Darkest Hour. It's entirely possible it's an issue from that war that's just continued onto this new one. Aside from that, actually, is there any other major developments? LOD joined the war, but it's not too interesting. I don't believe the Golden Horde actually joined the war. I think someone posted a fake declaration of war. Let's look at the stats. Let's see how they're actually doing. So it's very early days. It seems like most of the focus has gone on TKR and Grumpy. I would have expected more wars against Grumpy. Because Grumpy is really their primary threat. Lots of these smaller... Yeah, Bourbon Street 1 or 2 wars. Actually, I think they said they weren't attacking Bourbon Street. But Bourbon Street has to enter. That's sort of another weird thing that I don't fully understand. They declared war on everyone but Bourbon Street and Gator. Like, why? Bourbon Street is bound to enter via these MDPs. The only reason that you would exclude them in this way is if you thought you'd convince them to not participate, like, politically already. Or if you think they're cowards and they just won't honor their MDPs. Or that the CV is so rock solid that Bourbon Street, to protect its own honor, will not associate with the despicable and dishonorable grumpy old bastards. I don't see that happening at all. I think that Bourbon Street will look at the two and say, what's more dishonorable? Keeping your commitment via the treaty, or not defending an alliance that plotted against Eclipse or whatever. To their credit, actually, that is an MDP treaty, not an MDOAP treaty. So maybe there's an argument that by plotting that Grumpy has basically voided the treaty. They've embarked on offensive action, and therefore Bourbon Street doesn't have to defend them. But that's sort of a weird argument. And Bourbon Street was already lacking in allies. They don't really have anywhere else to go from what I can see. So it doesn't make sense for them not to defend Grumpy. Aside from that, Empire of the Romans, MFRC, I don't think those will become involved. If they do, it won't make too much of a difference. There aren't that many other posts. I guess we're still waiting on the ROHs. It might take a day or two, because like this was, I think, quite a surprise for them. Eclipse, Weaponism, the rest of their coalition didn't really militarize that much. And I think TKR suspected they were going to hit a different block, probably Midgard, because they have an ROI. They haven't faced a war in a while either. So yeah, they probably didn't have any memes or any posts made up for this. I know some alliances, because you can predict wars pretty accurately, like 3 or 4 months in advance, they take their time and they work on what their memes and their posts are going to be before the wars really even like started being planned. Oh, let's look at the... Actually, this is the this is the announcement on Royal. There isn't too much information here. They've kept it very brief, but I did the tiering and the strength graphs for the conflict. So for military strength, and this is something I said when I first heard about the war, I said there's a chance that Grumpy and TKR will win this, because Eclipse has a strong whale tier, don't get me wrong, but Eclipse's whales are mostly newer players, or they're people from perhaps some of the less active alliances, whereas Grumpy's whales are mostly former high gov and former leaders. Grumpy's whale tier is very capable, albeit not the most active, but significantly more active, I think, than Eclipse's. I could be wrong, but that's my understanding. And looking at the strength graph, yep, it seems that overall, TKR actually has a significant advantage. A very significant advantage. Like, look at that. They're coalition too, by the way. Yeah, Eclipse and Co are in blue. That could easily swing in favor of TKR, because it's I think the best way to explain war in this game is actually kind of like dominoes, right? It's not dominoes on a flat surface either, it's dominoes on an incline. So if you knock a domino down from the top, then it will rush to the bottom quite quickly. If you try and do it the other way, you're going to meet resistance. So pushing from below, quite difficult. Pushing down, very easy. There is a very realistic chance that Eclipse loses this war. Even with blitz advantage, which is very significant, even with military advantage, mostly with their buys. Yeah, it's very realistic they lose. If they do lose this, the peace terms will be horrific. I mean, because TKR, they're hitting them during like ROI, before they've got a return on investment on their infrastructure. And this is not the first time this has happened to TKR either, so I don't really see them being very forgiving. That said, I don't think TKR can really hold them at war for very long without losing ground against most of the other spheres. I don't think I've seen a global war where... Actually, some people argue this isn't a global because there are only 2 spheres and like you need 60% of the game to be involved to be a global. And maybe not. It's still a great war. It's still like very significant. There'll still be hundreds of billions in damages. It still changes global politics dramatically. Like most of the game's upper tier is fighting this war. But yeah, I can't think of a single other time where like a coalition has entered a war expecting to lose with this sort of disadvantage. At least on the strength graph. You actually see this type of disadvantage more in micro conflicts. I guess we'll see. Looking at this alone, it does look like TKR and Grumpy will actually win. But I mean, blitz advantage is really powerful, so it's possible they overcome it. And I haven't seen this over time. Like, it might be that it was significantly better for Grumpy earlier in the morning, and that it would diminish over time. This is the city count graph, and it's hard to really make sense of it because it goes off the page a little bit, but not too far that I can see, roughly. TKR's coalition owns the upper tier. City 39 and above, they just own it. It's kind of weird because this graph doesn't really demonstrate that, but yeah, it seems like they just own this tier. Below that, it seems equal, except for at City 30. But it's not a huge advantage at City 30. Like, it's maybe 20 nations? That sounds significant. But City 40 is so OP, because City 40 can down declare to like City 28. With military. It is disgusting. And same with City 50, they can hit like City 30s. The score mechanics, they've tried to adjust them to make the game more balanced, but it really hasn't worked. There still needs to be quite a few more adjustments. I would say not only to city score, but to perhaps unit score as well. The damages, I think they mostly reflect infra loss. I don't think they actually reflect unit loss that much. Planes killed, 60,000, 34,023. That looks like only like a 20,000 plane difference. It has only been like a few hours, and it's not an insignificant accomplishment, but it does seem quite early to judge the war. I think we'll see more developments later, more alliances joining. Or something, because it doesn't make a ton of sense that they'd go into this expecting to lose with these odds unless no other alliance was willing to help them. And no, actually, I guess TKR, if it's quite narrow, then yeah, TKR, and TKR is expecting to lose, then they may call in someone else. I'm trying to think of who, because a lot of alliances were already involved in the last war and therefore cannot realistically fight this one. This is a very unusual war. I did not expect it. I did not know that this was going to happen. I'm a bit disappointed by it, because I predicted like every war going back several years now. But I'm also happy about it. I give Eclipse full props to this. I was going to make a video at some point about how like wars were just kind of boring now, because there was nothing to them. They were very short, and they were over inconsequential stuff. And this war isn't too different, but it's different enough that it's given me hope, because the memes are pretty good. The arguments for why it's happening are interesting and somewhat detailed. And having that element of unpredictability, not just in how the war started, but also how it might end, that's really good for the game. That will keep people engaged and interested in finding out what's happening next. And that the fact that there's like history and that things are coming from like a global or two ago, but not like years ago, that's good as well. It breathes some life into the politics. It allows politics to change and evolve over time without being tied to the baggage of 2006. Which it does seem that like some wars are, especially like global wars in the past. And there's also another element about like, I guess I would say not class warfare, but the contest between the lower tier and the high tiers. The fact that Eclipse and Grumpy are fighting it out means that a lot of the smaller alliances with low tiers, mid tiers, high tiers at City 30 can start to catch up to them a bit. Because when there's bipolarity or unipolarity in the whale tier, then that has a knock-on effect on the rest of the game. It makes hegemonies much easier to form, because that alliance is either a hegemony unto itself, or if it just signs a few more, then it will become one. That's sort of what happened with Grumpy. That basically wherever they went, they'd create a hegemony. Or it creates bipolarity, because you need Eclipse to take down Grumpy and vice versa. And that alters the way politics works. The more alliances that start to catch up to them, then the more you have sort of multipolarity. Although there's also other downsides to that, which I've articulated in plenty of posts elsewhere. But in short, if alliances like Rose, super alliances, also are now competing in the whale tier, then it means you can join one alliance, remain in that alliance forever, and get from City 1 to City 50. And it's a continuous pipeline of creating those nations, which could hasten the decline of the game. A bit, maybe. It's a lot of theory, and yeah, I don't know. I think overall this is good. You know, I think more alliances becoming more powerful is a good thing. In terms of peace terms, I don't know what to expect for peace terms. I think TKR will be quite punishing if they win. How that, like, what they do specifically, hard to tell. If Eclipse wins, they're going for a non-aggression pact. Like, that is what they will do. Because if they can get Grumpy out of the way for a few months, it means the next war they either can't lose or it's very hard to lose. Who's the alliance that benefits most from this? Actually, overall, like, who benefits most from this war? It's probably Eclipse, if they win. I think TKR is sort of troubled because even if they win, they lose a ton of money. It might be Midgard. No way. It might actually be TI. Rose already lost a war. They were not going to be in this one anyway, or if they were, it'd be like 3 or 4 months out. Aurora and TS were... they benefit a lot too, because TS Actually, no, they don't. I was going to say they did because TS could try and avoid getting rolled for helping TKR in their last war. But this essentially does open them up to being rolled by Rose. So, no, not necessarily TS. I think Midgard actually does benefit the most. Because ignoring everything else, right? If Eclipse and TKR are involved, they're out of the running for hitting Midgard. TS has bigger fish to fry. It has to deal with Rose potentially. If they hit Midgard, Rose will probably just come in. If they hit Rose, Midgard will come in. Or Midgard might sit out. And because there's that possibility that Midgard sits out, I would say that, yeah, I don't think that really works out for them. Syndicate's not doing great. Rose isn't doing great. TKR Eclipse aren't doing great. Midgard's the only real winner here. They'll just be building cities using the City 20 update for a few months, I would say. That's fun. Well done to them. They successfully navigated 6 months, 5 months apiece. That takes quite a bit of skill.